Welcome, this is A.J.B from A.J.B Counseling and Psychotherapy. I am a psychotherapist in the state of New York and New Jersey, specializing in the treatment of panic attacks. And today I bring to you a very exciting case study. So if you've been following my videos, there is a treatment modality that I am pushing forward, I am proposing for the treatment of panic attacks and or agoraphobia or panic disorder. And this is a case study of its application, and it's exciting because this showcases how a panic attack, this is a sub-threshold panic attack, can be interrupted in a single session. So here what we're gonna see is the session flow and how two core fears that drive and maintain the panic end up getting interrupted. Very exciting stuff. I will be bringing you more case studies of this. This is my unofficial way of testing this before I hopefully have some opportunity to actually do a study on this to confirm its efficacy. So let's jump into what this looks like. So if you were to be a client, what this would look like. So the patient was in the 30s, a male in his 30s. The diagnosis was agoraphobia, and he contacted me that day. There were some changes in his life, sudden changes in his environment, and it set off an unexpected sub-threshold panic attack. So sub-threshold panic attack is as opposed to a full-blown panic attack, is a panic attack where you don't reach the peaks of the panic, right? So in a full-blown panic attack, you will reach peaks of panic, and it's going to be overwhelming, and it will last maybe 30 minutes or something like that. Whereas a sub-threshold panic attack can last days. It can last hours, days, weeks even, I've heard. So this was the case of a sub-threshold panic attack. It was like a persistent state of doom and gloom. So let's see. So let's jump in here. Let me just jump right into the session. So we booked the session for the same day. I get contacted by this client, and then we booked the session for that evening. It's done by webcam, and the patient conveyed a profound sense of impending disaster, describing feelings of being overwhelmed and anxious, lasting the entire day. He also told me that he slept poorly and that he hasn't eaten anything because he hasn't had any appetite. The lack of appetite will come into play because that will be one of the signals that we're moving in the right direction when his appetite starts coming back. So what's the first thing that I did? My first move is to contain the experience. So when someone is experiencing a panic attack, a lot of times we, during a panic attack, end up flailing our arms around, metaphorically speaking. It's this attempt at escaping the current situation, the current predicament, but there's really no escape, right? And there's this constant search for how do I manage this? How do I right? So the first thing, and we, as a result, we don't observe exactly how we feel, exactly what are we trying to escape. We don't pause to do that. The metaphor a lot of times I give to portray pausing and observing what is actually happening to us, what is it exactly that we're trying to escape, is by giving this metaphor. Asking to do that, asking for someone to pause and observe where the threat, where the sensations, what is it exactly that I'm trying to escape, is akin to stopping to smell the roses in a war zone, right? Because in a war zone, there's all kinds of chaos going and you just want to get to safety, right? It's this frantic behavior aimed at trying to restore control and safety. And so that's why people a lot of times don't do that, because it's a natural reaction that we have, right? And it almost sounds ludicrous if I was to ask you, hey, during a war zone, while there's gunfire everywhere, just take a moment and smell the roses. It just sounds absurd. Except that this is not actually a war zone, but we act like it is. And so that's why people have a hard time noticing what is exactly causing this discomfort. So the first thing I do is to do exactly that. Let's stop and smell the roses in this war zone. because this is not actually a war zone, although we're acting like it is. So the first thing we do is containing the experience. This is, in a nutshell, I focus the person on their body mostly, because most people are aware of their cognitions. What am I thinking? What kind of catastrophes are we having? So I bring their attention to their body, because that's where a lot of the sensations that we find freaky, for lack of a better term, are located. So this is a mindful grounding exercise, and I guide them through this. And we start from the head and we go all the way to the toes. Usually we don't have to go to the toes. Most of the stuff usually happens somewhere in the head or in the chest or in the stomach. And this individual, little by little, starts becoming aware of more and more sensations. I believe the first sensation starts with their awareness. First starts with butterflies in shoulders and stomach, and then I believe more things get noticed. So there's a sensation of energy later on. He develops an awareness of sensation of energy coursing through his legs, and an increased heart rate, and feeling of nausea in his stomach. And then that's when he mentions that he hasn't had any appetite. So we did that for a couple minutes, just to get him fully situated in this. And then I also explain why this is important. And the reason why doing this is important is because it helps us to contain the experience, right? A panic attack, when it's not contained, when we don't know exactly what we're reacting to, can be perceived as an infinite threat, a unknown threat. By making it known, we're actually increasing our sense of control, right? All right, so let's keep going. So what's the next thing that I do? Next thing I did is I transitioned to ACT and commitment therapy. So it's not a very different thing than containing the experience. A very similar thing, except here I accentuate that we're not trying to control what's happening. Don't control what's happening. So the first part was noticing what's happening. The second part, this transition to ACT, is about not controlling what's happening. Let's abandon all attempts at changing the experience. I know that this is something that you want to change, but let's focus on not doing that. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what ACT is. And we had this person stay with that for a bit. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything important. Oh, right. I did provide some psychoeducation around how the more open and willing one is to experience inner states, the less problematic they become. So basically, the more willing you are to experience what is happening, the less likely you are to be experiencing it. Because if you have seen any of my videos, panic is a loop. It's a fear loop, like this. So first you have the fear, so you become afraid of fear of symptoms of fear, such as that energy coursing through your legs, or increased heart rate, and then you react with more fear to that, and then reacting to more fear to having fear-based symptoms intensifies those symptoms, and then you get stuck in this loop. And then the more intense the symptoms get, the higher your anticipation goes. So there's also a concept of anticipation anxiety. So as your symptoms intensify, the closer you feel to that disaster, to whatever it is, whatever disaster you imagine that is waiting for you at the end of the line. So perhaps a better way of conceptualizing it is like this, as a spiral, right? That goes higher and higher and higher. This way you have the anticipation anxiety up and down, and then you have also the spiral nature, the looping nature of panic here. All right, so that's it in a nutshell. I believe I might have not actually explained that, but I said it in different words, in a much shorter. I delivered it in a shorter way because this is a single session. This person's in panic. I have to be as concise as possible. So once this person was sat in that, okay, I'm trying not to resist. I'm open to whatever. I'm trying to be open to whatever's happening. I'm not pushing and I'm not pulling. I'm just letting things be. I don't remember how long I waited. It was a couple of minutes probably. I introduced paradoxical intent. So here's what I'm trying to do in this session. I'm going to show you this picture right here. First we started, so this right here represents them coming in to that session in panic. I then brought them here. Okay? To ACT, to that mindful place. I mean, at first I did containment. This is not included here. Maybe I should include it here. And then I brought them to ACT intervention, which is that we're not pushing, we're not pulling, we're just chilling with whatever's happening. So look right here, this is the scale right here that represents willingness to experience. So they are now theoretically at 50% of willingness to experience. Okay, they're I don't know if they're actually there, but they are higher than they were before. Before they were here when they came, now they're somewhere around here. And now my job is to push them up here to 100% willingness, okay? So this is why we then switch to paradoxical intent. So this is what I'm doing now. Paradoxical intent stretches your willingness to experience something. It asks you to pursue the worst that you imagine, right? So whatever is happening to you that you're so afraid of, I ask you to go get it, right? We're asking you to have a paradoxical intention, to be willing to desire the thing that you don't want to happen, right? We're asking you to force yourself to experience it, and this will interrupt that anticipation anxiety. Because think of it this way. I'm going to explain it quickly, just in case you haven't watched the other videos. Imagine you have somebody who's trying to fight you from far away. Imagine the anticipation anxiety that you'll be feeling about the impending fight. But now what would happen if how could you interrupt that anticipation anxiety? How could you destroy this anticipation scale? By bum rushing him, right? Instead of waiting for the fight to happen, you bring the fight to them. This is the equivalence here. This is how you end up destroying this anticipation anxiety that drives a lot of the panic cycle. That's why PI, paradoxical intent, is so great. But most people end up resisting the experience. Most people end up resisting paradoxical intent. That's why you see a line going back down to ACT. So the whole idea here is to just bounce between ACT, PI, ACT, PI, ACT, PI, ACT, PI, until we have a breakthrough. And in this case, it went beautifully. It went very smoothly. One thing I forgot to include about this patient, I should have mentioned this in the beginning, I forgot to. I have met with this patient before. I had a pre-existing relationship with him for about 6 sessions. And during those 6 sessions, we addressed one core issue that was maintaining their panic. So this person actually had, up to today, 3 core issues. The first one was social, and we addressed that social one. So now, back to the session, I introduced paradoxical intent. I explained the concept that I just explained to them, and I asked them to amplify these symptoms, right? And as I explained, it's a willingness stretching exercise. I didn't actually frame it this way at this point because when initially I don't want to frame it that way because I want to give them a chance to fully be willing for the worst to happen. So if we were to look at panic, as that spiral, I want to give them a chance to become fully willing to experience that peak experience. But unfortunately, they resisted, like most people do, and they experienced an increase in intensity. So they end up being higher on the anticipation scale. Their symptoms that escalated, and they were maybe, let's just say, hypothetically somewhere here. And so I just had them hang out here for a little bit, and then I asked them to intensify it again. Right? This is important because this is just like a stretching exercise. You're doing reps, right? So I wanted them to push a little farther, and they did. And then I hung out with them in that spot for a bit, and then we went back down to ACT. So let me see, where did I say that? Somewhere, I don't remember. We went back to doing ACT, and we got our first sign of improvement. It was at this point that they started reporting hunger for the first time in a day. Great sign. Arguably that is a sign that their fight or flight response was dropping lower, allowing for normal digestive process to resume. And I highlighted this to the patient because I wanted them to get a taste of the reward that risk taking, because this was a risk for them doing this, and for you, if you're going to be doing this is going to feel risky. It's not risky. It's not actually risky, but it's going to feel like a risk. So I wanted them to feel the reward, and they did. And because this just builds like a momentum. It's like a snowball effect, So I highlighted that this is a great sign. They recognize that it's a great sign. And here I just explained that the PI can be used both as a panic cycle interrupter, so if you, or as exposure. So when we conceptualize it as a willingness stretching exercise, it functions more as an exposure. When you resist, right? And we conceptualize it as a willingness stretching exercise, it functions more as an exposure. But if you fully submit to it, you fully become willing to experience the worst of the worst, it ends up being a panic cycle interrupter. So I just point that out. It's not all that important for this. So then at this point I reframed it. At this point I was anticipating that this individual was going to resist again. So before going back up to PI, paradoxical intent, I reframed it to them overtly as a willingness stretching exercise. And I also, in anticipation of the resistance, I asked them to look out for any resistance that I experienced. You know, when you're sitting there trying to will yourself to have a worse panic attack. Oh, I should mention something, but let me first finish this statement. When you're sitting there trying to will yourself to have a worse panic attack, you are likely, and you're resisting, you're likely to sense that resistance. That, like, yeah, I don't really want this to happen. Well, what is that all about? That I don't really want this to happen. Look at that, right? So I was basically asking him to look at that resistance, and what came out was that there was a new fear. So it almost seems like in some way we addressed the first fear. The first fear, by the way, was fear of just having a panic attack. I don't think I mentioned that in the beginning. So it seems like the first time around, during the first ACT-PI loop, we resolved that fear, or at least some of it, of having to experience a panic attack. And then this second time, a new panic attack was having to endure these sensations for the rest of their life. I forget where I wrote that. Doesn't matter. So let me just go back real quick, because there is one thing that is important to note that a lot of people might have a question about when it comes to paradoxical intent. Here, understandably, he was uncertain about how to actively pursue a more intense panic attack. So when I gave him the instructions to do paradoxical intent, he wasn't sure, how do I do that, right? I stayed vague, and I stayed vague on purpose, because what you do doesn't matter as much as you wanting it to happen. So I just leave you to do whatever you're gonna do. So I would just say, just try it, just give it a shot. Right, so that's just important to point out, because a lot of people will probably have questions about that. And then, so yeah, we discovered this new fear, the new fears of having to experience this panic attack forever. So how did I address that? At this point, I realized we gotta do something called value-based action, or value-based or commitment, value-based commitment, something like that. Commitment to pursuing what you want to do, irrespective of what you're experiencing. So how did I do that in this session? So in this session, I asked them to first intensify their panic, and they did, and they experienced a new sensation. I think it was chest tightness. And so then I asked them, okay, so let's hang out here and now answer some questions for me. I asked them, what's 2 plus 2? And I asked them, what's 3 times 3? And they answered, 4, 9, great. So I'm like, okay, so you can do math, all right. Then I asked them, what did I ask them? I asked, oh, no. And then I think the first thing I asked them was actually, move your hand up and down. Can you do that? And they did. They moved their hand up and down. Okay, great. So you can move your hand. Then I asked them to do math. Okay, great. You can do math. Then I asked them, give me a fun historical fact. And they did. They told me some fun historical fact. So I was like, so it looks to me like you can do everything you need to do. You can do math. You can move your body. And you can do creative work. You can tell me fun historical facts. So it seems like this is not, even though you're feeling all this, it's not really stopping you from anything. And then the next thing I did is I started trying to leverage aggression. I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't know to what amount of impact it had on this session, but I threw it in there anyway, because I tend to, whenever I have a private client, I throw everything at them in the kitchen sink and see what sticks. There is evidence that waking up anger and aggression towards panic, towards something, right? There's no evidence about panic, because nobody done studies on this, but theoretically, there's evidence to suggest that when we get angry at something, even if it's a scary thing, we end up experiencing more motivation, higher risk taking, more confidence, right? Everything that's antithetical to fear. So it's almost like fear washes away, anger washes away the fear. And there's linguistically, even if we look at the language, you might hear phrases like drunk with rage. Well, what happens when you're drunk? You lose inhibition, right? You gain confidence. Drunk with rage. There's also a Welsh proverb, a medieval proverb. Anger is as good as courage, right? And I think there's one more. Drunk with rage. Drunk with rage. I don't remember. There's one more phrase that just suggests this. There's this phenomenon that anger unlocks us, makes us more risk taking. And there are studies that show this. So if you're curious, you can check this out. So how did I do this here? At this point, there was really no time to do a more lengthy anger induction. So instead, I relied on my own language. I did something what some might call ego lending, where I spoke for the patient about the situation in an angry way. So here I give some examples. I don't actually remember what I said during the session, but this is kind of like a rough approximation of what I said. So it's something like, how much longer will you let this panic torment you? Haven't you had enough of it controlling you? Aren't you angry about what is taken from you? Why not turn the tables and get under its skin for once? Imagine telling your panic that out of pure defiance, you're going to live your life exactly as you want, not how the panic dictates. Do it out of spite. And I think, the longer I work on this anger, spite is that key. Spite is that key phrase for how to aggressively apply value-based action to panic. So again, value-based action refers to you just, I can do math, I can do this, I can do everything, I can talk, and just doing it, right? Spitefully, like in defiance of your panic. It's like your panic is trying to torment you, control you, tell you that you can't do this, just ruin your life, right? And so in spite, in defiance, you're doing all this, right? Connecting to that anger first, and then doing it. So if you're trying to apply this for yourself, by the way, and you can't connect to the anger, well, first try to focus on spite. Can I get mad at it just for what the panic has done to me? Can I get mad at it? Something else that can be helpful is personify it. Give it an image, whatever it is that comes to mind. See what comes to mind. Maybe a little goblin demon. That's what comes to my mind. Whatever comes to your mind, use an image, because personification just makes the expression of anger more natural. And then lastly, if you're still struggling to summon that anger, remember the last time someone just really made you furious, but not the kind of angry where you end up resisting the anger, meaning you don't feel anxious, you don't feel anxiety, you just feel pure rage and you're ready to start throwing punches. Or maybe you did throw punches, maybe you punched the wall, just that anger. And remember what that felt like. Your body, what did your body feel like? Put yourself back in that situation. Use that memory, use that recollection, bring it back to yourself right now, and then focus back on your panic while trying to maintain that feeling of anger. And see if you can now reconnect to that spitefulness, that defiance, that anger of how much you want to destroy the panic. Okay, that will help you become more risk-taking. That will help you become more confident. It will enhance your perception of control. That I can do this, right? I don't know if you've ever noticed that. And I certainly have. When I was a kid, I have a bully who I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of them. But eventually, they crossed the line, and I just became angry, and I suddenly just felt like I can destroy them. Like anger is power. Anger is power. Not to encourage, of course, people to be going around rageaholics, but anger should not be denied either. Anger should not be denied. It should be used appropriately. That's really what I'm getting at here. Using anger appropriately. So after I did that, there was a breakthrough. was beautiful. So he began to smile, and he referred to this moment as groundbreaking. This realization that he can just go around doing whatever he needs to do, and the panic faded, and they were good. They were free from those particular two fears, right? The fear of experiencing panic attack in the moment, and then having to experience it forever. Now, does that mean that they are free? They cured their panic in a single session? Probably not. Probably not. Right? Panic resolution. Once you get onto the right formula, it goes like this. It goes down quickly, as long as you keep on pursuing it, as long as you don't go back to your old ways and start avoiding it. But it tends to drop like that. It drops pretty quickly over the course of about a month or so. You just keep on reapplying the same stuff, and eventually your panic attacks and your cessation of panic goes to zero, and you're done. So that's that. I hope you found this exciting. I know I did. Hopefully soon I will bring you another case study. It's different, right? This one was unique because this is an individual who was experiencing panic in the moment, and we were able to help them through. The next case is going to be done more from a more cold, in the sense that this person doesn't come in hot. This person is not experiencing panic, but they have agoraphobia, and we have to start from scratch. In that case, we have to start everything from scratch. So you'll see a description of what it looks like to be in therapy for agoraphobia or panic disorder. It's really the treatment. I'm realizing, I've not long ago have realized that it's pretty much the same thing. It's the same thing, just different targets. So you'll see it from day one through to the resolution. So hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next one.